Before the story begins, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt lonely, even when you weren't alone? If you've ever loved someone, lived beside them, shared a home with them, and still felt invisible, then stay with me. And before I continue, if stories about real emotions, quiet betrayals, unspoken pain, and moments that change everything resonate with you, subscribe to this channel right now, not because of algorithms, but because stories like this don't just entertain, they tell the truth we're too afraid to say out loud. Now, listen carefully. Loneliness doesn't always arrive loudly. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't crash through the door. Sometimes it slips in quietly, like fog rolling across an empty street at dawn. Soft, persistent, unavoidable. That's how it came for me. My husband had been gone for a week. Or at least, that's what he told me. A work trip, emails, meetings, conference calls stacked on top of one another like excuses that sounded reasonable enough not to question. We weren't fighting. That almost made it worse. There were no slammed doors, no raised voices, no dramatic arguments that would have given my sadness a clear shape. Instead, there was distance, silence, a kind of emotional absence that slowly eats away at you because you can't point to it and say, "This is what's wrong." Lately, he had been elsewhere, always present in body, but never in spirit. Even when he was home, his attention lived inside his phone. His eyes skimmed over me like I was furniture, something familiar, useful, but no longer noticed. I kept telling myself this was normal, that long marriages settle into routines, that passion cools, that love matures into something quieter. But deep inside, something hurt. Not just the absence of touch, not just the lack of intimacy. It was the feeling of being unseen, of wondering when I stopped being someone worth looking at twice. Our neighbor RF lived a couple of doors down. At first, he was just another face in the hallway. Polite nods, small talk near the mailboxes, occasional help carrying groceries. Nothing memorable, nothing dangerous. But over time, something shifted. He listened when I spoke, really listened. When he asked how my day was, it didn't feel like a reflex. It felt like curiosity, like he genuinely wanted to know. And sometimes, his eyes lingered, not in a way that felt crude, not in a way that crossed a line, just long enough to make me feel noticed. That afternoon, rain pressed against the sky like it had nowhere else to go. It fell steadily, relentlessly turning the world outside into a blur of gray and silver. I stood by the window with a cup of tea warming my hands, watching droplets race each other down the glass. Inside the house, everything felt hollow, too quiet, too still. I caught my reflection in the window, softened by fog and shadow, and barely recognized the woman looking back. When did I start looking so tired? When did my eyes lose that spark? I don't know what pushed me to reach for my phone. Maybe it was the thunder rolling in the distance. Maybe it was the silence echoing through the rooms. Or maybe it was something far more dangerous. The desire to feel something again. I typed the message slowly, my heart beating harder with every word. "Hey, if you're free, would you like to stop by for coffee?" The moment I hit send, regret washed over me. I told myself it was harmless. Just neighbors. Just conversation. Nothing more. His reply came almost instantly. "Sure, I'd like that." My hands trembled as I set the phone down. When he arrived, rain clung to him. His jacket was damp, his hair slightly out of place. And yet, standing there in my doorway, he looked almost unreal, like a scene from a movie I didn't mean to step into. I handed him a towel. He smiled soft, easy, and thanked me. His voice wrapped around me like warmth. We sat on the couch. The room smelled faintly of cinnamon and rain. At first, we talked about nothing. The weather, work, some show he'd been watching. Safe topics. Neutral ground. But beneath the words, something unspoken moved between us. Glances lingered a second too long. Silences stretched without discomfort. Then he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and looked at me. Really looked at me. "You look exhausted," he said. The words hit harder than I expected. Not because they were unkind, but because they were true. "It's like," he continued more softly, "you've been carrying everything on your own for a long time." Something inside me cracked. Most people never see that part. The quiet weight, the emotional fatigue that settles into your bones. "I guess I have," I admitted, my voice betraying me. He didn't rush to fix it, didn't interrupt, didn't offer hollow reassurance. He simply nodded, as if allowing me permission to feel what I'd been burying. I turned toward him and studied his face. Calm, steady, but his eyes held something else, a question he wasn't asking. "I don't know why I invited you," I whispered. "I just didn't want to be alone." He didn't move, didn't speak, but the space between us felt alive. I nervously tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. His hand reached for mine. Slowly, carefully. When his fingers rested over my hand, my breath caught. It was such a simple thing. Such an innocent gesture. And yet, it felt overwhelming. I couldn't remember the last time someone held my hand like it meant something. We stayed like that, quiet, close. Then his thigh brushed against mine. Subtle, almost accidental. But my body reacted before my mind could. Not just physically, emotionally. My body remembered what it felt like to be wanted, to be cherished, to matter. I leaned back against the couch and closed my eyes. "Is this wrong?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment. His fingers traced lightly along my wrist, slow and thoughtful, like he was listening to my heartbeat. "It doesn't feel wrong," he said, "but I'll leave if you want me to." I opened my eyes, met his gaze. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The distance between us dissolved. His presence wrapped around me like a quiet storm, steady, consuming, impossible to ignore. I rested my hand on his shoulder. His breathing changed. Slower, deeper. Our foreheads touched. His hands settled at my waist, gentle, respectful. The tension I'd been holding for years melted beneath his touch. We were still fully clothed, yet closer than I'd felt to anyone in a very long time. Time lost its meaning. We spoke through silence, through shared breath, through the language of careful touch. And in that moment, I realized something that terrified me. What I was feeling wasn't just desire. It was grief for everything I had needed and never received. I don't know how long we stayed like that. Minutes blurred into something softer, heavier. The kind of time that doesn't move forward, it sinks. I traced slow, absent patterns along his chest, not because I was trying to seduce him, but because my hands needed somewhere to put all the feelings I had buried for years. His breathing brushed warm against my neck, steady and grounding, like sunlight filtering through a curtain you forgot to open. And that's when it hit me. What was happening between us wasn't fueled by desire alone. It was built from quiet disappointments, from conversations that never happened, from nights spent lying beside someone who felt a million miles away. This wasn't about him. It was about everything that had been missing long before he ever walked through my door. Outside, the sky darkened. The rain softened, tapering into a distant hum. Reality crept back in slowly, like the tide returning after a moment of false calm. He pulled back just enough to look at me. "What are you thinking?" he asked. The question felt dangerous. I swallowed, my throat tight. "I'm thinking," I said carefully, "that I'm going to regret this." His face didn't harden, didn't change. "Because of your husband?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I whispered, "and because of you." Because I let myself want something I can't have. Because I crossed a line I can't uncross. He nodded slowly, like he understood far more than I'd said out loud. I didn't come here to take anything from you, he said. I came because you asked. That was the moment my composure broke. Tears filled my eyes before I could stop them. Hot, sudden, humiliating. I turned my face away, embarrassed by how quickly I was unraveling. I just wanted to feel like myself again, I admitted. Not someone's background noise, not someone's responsibility, just me. He reached up and gently brushed a tear from my cheek. His touch was warm, careful, almost reverent. You are, he said softly. You always have been. Those words stayed with me longer than his presence ever could. Eventually, he stood. There was no dramatic goodbye, no promises, no apologies, just a quiet understanding that whatever this was, it couldn't live in daylight. At the door, he paused. Take care of yourself, he said. Then he was gone. The sound of the door closing felt louder than it should have. The house seemed emptier than before, not colder, just exposed. Like something had been opened that couldn't be sealed shut again. I stayed on the couch long after he left. I held the cushion where he had been sitting, breathing in the faint trace of rain and warmth, my skin still humming with the memory of his touch. And that's when the guilt arrived. Not like a slap, but like a weight. I hadn't slept with him. I hadn't crossed the most obvious line, but I had crossed something far more personal. I had allowed myself to be seen by someone who wasn't my husband. That night, when my husband called, his voice sounded normal, distracted, familiar. I answered like everything was fine. I laughed at the right moments, responded at the right times, and hated myself for how easy it was. Days passed, then weeks. Nothing happened, and yet everything had changed. Every time my husband touched his phone, I noticed. Every time he didn't look at me, I felt it more deeply. I realized something painful but honest. The moment with my neighbor didn't create the emptiness. It revealed it. I started asking myself questions I had avoided for years. When did we stop talking honestly? When did I stop saying what I needed? When did I decide silence was easier than confrontation? I didn't tell my husband what happened. Not because I was proud, but because I knew confessing wouldn't heal anything. It would only destroy what little stability we had left. Instead, I told him something else. I'm not okay, I said one night. He looked surprised, almost startled. I've been lonely, I continued. Even when you're here. That conversation didn't fix everything, but it cracked something open. We started talking again. Awkwardly, carefully. As for my neighbor, we became strangers once more. Polite nods, no lingering glances. And that was the hardest part, because the absence reminded me of what I had almost lost and what I nearly risked everything for. Now, when I think back on that afternoon, I don't label it as a mistake. I don't excuse it either. It was a collision between need and neglect, between silence and longing. I regret that I searched for comfort outside my marriage. But more than that, I regret waiting so long to admit I was hurting. I regret disappearing from myself. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if my marriage will survive or simply endure. All I know is this. For a few brief hours, I remembered who I was, and that memory changed me forever.